Last summer, my buddy Jake and I decided to go on a long road adventure together. Both of us were in college, but we attended different ones even though they were in the same state. The beginning of summer saw us working our butts off for the first 3 months, but we promised ourselves that come August, we would kick back and hit the road. The big idea was to drive from a town close to Chicago, stretching all the way to sunny California. The main reason? We had an uncle living there, and it seemed like a cool reason to make the trip. It'd take a good few days to drive all the way, but we weren't in a rush. The journey mattered more than the destination, so we wanted to take our sweet time and enjoy the ride. Now, Jake and I are kind of spontaneous. We didn't like to plan everything down to the last detail, so with a rough idea in mind, we hopped in the car and took off. We gave ourselves a week to make the trip, allowing us to stop wherever we fancied and stay as long as we felt like. Fast forward to day 3, and we found ourselves cruising through the scenic landscapes of Utah. We were making good time, actually faster than we'd expected. So we figured, why not stop and spend the night in a quaint little town? I was focusing on driving, humming along to the radio, while Jake fiddled with his phone, trying to find us a spot to crash for the night. After what felt like forever, Jake let out a sigh. The only place he found was a fancy hotel that would practically empty our wallets. Not ideal for 2 college guys trying to save a buck. Not willing to give up, Jake gave Airbnb a shot. Bingo! He found a cozy-looking place that was way cheaper than the hotel. The Airbnb was basically the ground floor of a 2-story house. It boasted a single bedroom with 2 separate beds. Couldn't have been more perfect for us. As I maneuvered through the roads, Jake filled me in on the details. This house was nestled about 10 minutes away from a super tiny town. Honestly, it was so out of the way that we wondered why anyone would even think to list it on Airbnb. Considering it wasn't a popular touristy spot, it made sense that the place was available at the last minute. Jake quickly reserved it, and with a new destination in mind, I pressed on. After driving for about another hour, we finally reached the house. Pulling up, we noticed we were on a dusty trail, surrounded by nature. The house itself was tucked behind some big trees. Maybe they were oak trees. I'm no tree expert. It seemed odd to find a house surrounded by trees in what felt like the middle of nowhere. The house itself was made of bright yellow bricks and topped with soft brown roof tiles. Though it seemed isolated, there were a couple of houses dotted around the place. We waited in the car for a bit, and Jake dropped the owner a quick text. In no time, we spotted an elderly gentleman emerging from behind the house. Jake and I got out of the car, stretching our legs, and walked over to the man approaching us. His name was Bill, he said, shaking our hands firmly. Bill was kind of short, probably in his early 50s. The sun had done its work on his skin, tanning it a deep bronze. You could tell he spent a lot of time outdoors. A mop of silver hair grew around the sides of his head while the top was mostly bald. Bill had a friendly smile and told us that he lived upstairs in the house. We would be staying on the main floor. After giving us a set of keys, he wandered off towards the back of the house. Night was starting to fall, so Jake and I settled down in the living room, chatting about the day's adventures. After a while, the tiredness of the journey caught up with us, and we decided to call it a night. Sleeping in a new place isn't always easy for me. I often find myself waking up several times during the night, and tonight was no exception. Jake, on the other hand, was out cold, snoring lightly. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I was jerked awake by the sound of the front door creaking open. My heart raced as I listened carefully. Soft footsteps echoed from the living room, barely audible but definitely there. I slowly got out of bed, moving quietly, and tiptoed to our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Peeking out, I saw the dim beam of a flashlight moving around. Someone was snooping, and then the light caught something shiny. It was Bill. The true shock came when the light revealed the outline of a gun tucked into his belt. Panic surged through me. I quietly moved back to my bed, feigning sleep, my mind racing with all kinds of scenarios. We were strangers here, miles away from anyone we knew, and we hadn't told anyone about this specific Airbnb. The only saving grace was that if anything happened, the Airbnb booking would hopefully leave some trace of our last whereabouts. But such comforting thoughts were far from my mind right then. The minutes dragged on like hours with me on high alert, but eventually Bill left the room and the house went silent. When I was certain he was gone, I nudged Jake awake, whispering frantically about what I'd witnessed. Without wasting any time, we gathered our stuff, tiptoed out of the house, and drove away as fast as we could. As dawn broke, we found a local police station, but they weren't much help. Their disinterest gave me the feeling they weren't keen on outsiders. Our next step was to notify Airbnb about our midnight encounter. Thankfully, after our report, Bill was no longer allowed to host on the site. The next day, while on the road, Jake and I tried to piece together Bill's intentions. He hadn't entered our room, so maybe he didn't intend harm. Maybe he wanted to rob us. But we hadn't left anything valuable in the living room. Whatever his reasons, the sight of that gun was enough to give us both nightmares for a long time. John and I had been seeing each other for a little more than a year. It wasn't super serious, but we both felt that we were getting closer each day. We thought, why not go on a mini trip together? Living in a bustling city can be a bit much, so we thought a weekend away in a quiet town a couple of hours' drive away would be a nice change of pace. Now, this story is from around 2015, when Airbnb was the new, cool way to travel. We both had never tried it before and thought this was the perfect opportunity. So we dived into the app, scrolling through the many options available. Money was a bit tight, so we had to look for affordable choices. After a bit of looking, we stumbled upon a pretty basic room. It was in a shared house, but the important thing was it had its own bathroom. We didn't really need a fancy kitchen or a lounge just for ourselves, so it seemed perfect. Once we had everything set up for our stay, we eagerly waited for the weekend. When it finally arrived, we packed our bags and made our way to our Airbnb stay. We drove into a really peaceful neighborhood. You could hear birds chirping and children playing. The house we were staying at was pretty old, with slightly faded white walls and green-colored frames. If you were just passing by, you wouldn't guess it was an Airbnb. As we approached the front door, I noticed a small box attached to the wall. "Must be the lockbox," I said. We took a minute to retrieve the key using a code that the host had messaged us earlier. I was kind of excited about the fact that we wouldn't have to awkwardly chat with the host. The whole process was so smooth. We just walked in like it was our own place. Inside, the house was well kept. The ground floor had a spacious living room and kitchen. Everything looked so new and unused. I guessed that maybe the hosts didn't live there and it was just for guests. We made our way upstairs to our room. As I set down my bag, Sarah did the same. Then suddenly, we heard footsteps. We assumed it was probably another guest. After all, it was a shared house. Wanting to make the most of our trip, we freshened up quickly. I took a shower, and soon we were ready to venture out. The town had a lot of cute spots to see, and we didn't want to waste any time. We spent the entire day exploring the town, taking pictures, and trying local foods. By the time we had dinner and were ready to return, it was quite late. Coming back to the house, everything was silent. It felt like we were the only ones there. We climbed the stairs, whispering and giggling about our day. And as we tucked ourselves into bed, the anticipation for the next day's adventures bubbled inside us. The next morning, as the sun peeked through the curtains, I found Sarah sitting at the edge of the bed, lost in thought. "Hey, did you hear anything weird last night?" she asked, her voice quivering a bit. "What do you mean?" I responded, rubbing my eyes. Sarah hesitated for a moment before she whispered, "I think someone was outside our door. I heard some noises." At first, I wasn't too worried. I thought maybe it was just someone from another room using the bathroom. After all, our room was the only one with its own private bathroom, so it could have been someone from another room walking around. But Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. "No, John. I heard someone trying to open our door." I felt a shiver down my spine. We still hadn't seen anyone else in the house. Could there be someone else staying there? Or was it someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all? Sarah seemed to notice the worried look on my face. "Should we leave?" she asked. But there were still so many places we wanted to visit in the town. Plus, I didn't want to overreact. "Let's stay," I suggested, "but we'll be cautious." Sarah wasn't thrilled about it, but she agreed. That night, we again went to bed late after a day full of exploration. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I was out. But a few hours later, Sarah was shaking me awake. She put a finger to her lips and pointed at the door. Someone was definitely trying to get in. I could hear the sound of the door handle moving and a weird scratching noise, like someone using tools on the lock. Adrenaline kicked in. I jumped up shouting, "Who's there? Go away!" There was a pause. Then we heard soft footsteps moving away from our door. "We have to leave," I whispered. Sarah nodded in agreement. We quickly packed our things. Each passing minute felt like hours. The clock showed it was around 4 in the morning. Taking a deep breath, I peeked out of our room. The dim light from the moon outside showed an empty corridor. Holding Sarah's hand, we tried to tiptoe down the stairs, but one creaky step gave us away. Hearing that sound, we made a dash for the front door, not bothering to close it behind us. We hopped into the car and sped away, leaving the mysterious house behind. Once daylight broke, I called the house owner to explain the unsettling events of the night. After sharing our story, there was an eerie silence on the other end. Finally, the owner's shaky voice came through. "You two were the only guests that night. No one else had booked a room." A couple of years ago, I purchased a home. At that moment, I was living in a comfy apartment which I was pretty fond of. So I thought, why not keep living in the apartment and turn the new house into an Airbnb? I mean, the main reason for getting the house was to make some money off it anyway. The house I got was one half of a duplex, right near the busy and lively downtown area. That made me think that it would be a hot spot for travelers looking for a place to crash, especially since there were a ton of places tourists like to visit close by. The house wasn't new, but the ground level had recently been spruced up by the time I got it. Yet, the outside still gave off this cool, retro vibe from the 1960s. The red bricks and the white window coverings made it pop. Although I didn't get close with the folks living nearby, most of them seemed like young college students. That meant if there ever was a noise issue, we'd probably be even, given both sides might have their loud days. There was a basement in the house, too. But to be honest, it was kind of creepy. One big room that was super chilly, with hard concrete underfoot and a lot of pipes and stuff hanging from the ceiling. And because the ceiling was so close to your head, you couldn't really use the space for much besides storing stuff. And since I didn't have any fancy or expensive stuff to store there, I didn't even bother putting a lock on the basement door when I listed the house on Airbnb. Now, starting off as an Airbnb host wasn't a walk in the park. Initially, I had to be there every single time a guest came just to hand over the keys. That got old real quick, so I decided to switch to these high-tech locks that worked with a code. This way, I just had to send the code to the guests via text, and they could let themselves in. And to be safe, I made sure to shuffle up the codes often. I'd heard too many spooky tales about past guests showing up uninvited. Plus, I had a cleaner who helped me tidy up the place and often set a new code for the door. One day, I got a booking from a dude named Mike. Mike told me he was coming over with his buddy and his cousin, something about a pre-wedding bash. By this time, I had everything working like a well-oiled machine. My trips to the house were almost non-existent, all thanks to the cleaner handling the tidying up and the coded locks, meaning I didn't need to hand over keys in person. I simply sent Mike the code. expecting that to be the end of it. But then, out of the blue, my phone rang. I picked it up and heard a guy go, "Hey there, it's Mike. We're cool to have a couple more buddies over, right?" I replied, "Yeah, just don't turn the place upside down, okay?" I chuckled a bit, trying to ease Mike's worry. "The folks next door are chill, so no, I don't think they'd ring up the cops or anything," I replied. "Cool, just checking," he responded before ending the call. At the time, I really didn't think much of our chat. It seemed just like a usual conversation with a guest. The weekend flew by and everything seemed quiet. Not a single complaint about noise or anything like that. It was on Monday, right in the middle of the day, when my phone buzzed with a call from Jo, my trusty cleaner. I picked it up, and from the moment she spoke, I could tell she was super scared. Her voice was shaky, like she'd just seen a ghost or something. She quickly told me I needed to come over to the house, that something was really wrong. Feeling a mix of confusion and worry, I decided to leave work early and see what all the fuss was about. As I pulled up to the house, I saw Jo standing a little distance away, like she didn't want to be too close. I parked up and jogged over to her. She seemed less panicked now, but she was still pretty shaken up. "What's going on?" I asked. She just motioned with her hand towards the house, whispering, Just go check the basement." Curious and slightly nervous, I stepped into the house. There were signs of a party for sure. Empty beer bottles scattered about, some drink stains on the carpet, and that undeniable post-party smell. I remembered my college days and the mess we would make after a wild night. This seemed like a medium-level mess. Not the worst, but not the best either. I slowly made my way to the basement, noticing that the door was already open, probably from when Jo had run out in a hurry. I carefully descended the stairs, and reaching the bottom, I flicked on the lone light bulb that dangled from the ceiling. As my eyes scanned the room, they settled on something strange in a dim corner. I cautiously walked over, and on getting closer, my heart sank. The floor had a puddle of what looked like blood, and even scarier were the blood-stained footprints that led towards the stairs. My heart was racing now, and to add to the eerie scene, there was a messy bunch of blood-covered tape lying next to the pool. Doing my best to keep calm, I dialed the cops and then quickly headed outside to wait for them. When they arrived, both Jo and I shared everything we knew. The house was soon cordoned off, turning into a sort of mini crime scene for several days. The police did reach out to Mike, who had a story of his own about what might have happened. Weirdly enough, there were no reports of anyone being hurt or missing, so the evidence was thin. This meant that no one got arrested. Still, I did inform Airbnb about the whole thing. To this day, I have this gut feeling that something really creepy went down in my basement during that weekend. Every time I think about it, a cold shiver runs down my spine.